turn to Proverbs. We'll be looking at several texts as we have been, as we look at this topical study of Proverbs. Today, we're going to come to a discussion of the family. The family. This is part one. It was going to be part one of two, but given the way my notes turned out as I was studying it ready for today, it looks like it's going to be part one of three. But we'll see how it goes. But part one of a discussion on the family. And we're going to be looking at husbands and wives. Husbands and wives. We're going to be looking at different verses. I'll give you the first one we'll look at is in chapter 5. So you can go ahead and turn there to chapter 5. But as you know, the family is the cornerstone of any society. And as Proverbs is a book about wise living in a complex world, it has much to say about the virtues of family life and the dangers that families face. Probably won't touch on every topic that Proverbs says about this, but we're going to hit some major things tonight and in the next couple of weeks. We're going to spend, as I just said, a couple of weeks, looks like maybe 3 weeks, looking at what Proverbs says about the family, beginning with its instructions for husbands and wives. Before we look at some specific verses, though, let me point out, following Derek Kidner, this commentary I've been using a lot, that Proverbs clearly shows that the union of one man and one woman is the norm for marriage. Nowhere in the book of Proverbs, you'll see this in different parts of the Old Testament, but nowhere in the book of Proverbs is there any mention or even allusion to polygamy. Not even a whiff of it. Also, the emphasis throughout on the close, intimate bond between husband and wife belies the very possibility that polygamy could ever be wise and virtuous. And the examples, I'll add, of polygamy in the Old Testament, in almost every case, it always winds up causing some trouble, right? And that's why I think Proverbs doesn't talk about it, because it's not what God wants. But picking up on that very theme, let us notice, first of all, first thing I want you to notice is that the married couple is called to be ardently loyal and devoted to each other. That's a theme in the book of Proverbs. The married couple is called to be ardently loyal and devoted to each other. Look with me at chapter 5 and verses 15 through 20. We're going to look at several verses here. My Bible's pages keep sticking together because I spit on them with my cough drops. That's what happened. Sorry about that. But Proverbs chapter 5, verses 15 through 20. Drink water from your own cistern and fresh water from your own well. Should your springs be dispersed abroad, streams of water in the streets? Let them be yours alone and not for strangers with you. Let your fountain be blessed and rejoice in the wife of your youth. As a loving hind and a graceful doe, let her breasts satisfy you at all times. Be exhilarated always with her love. For why should you, my son, be exhilarated with an adulteress and embrace the bosom of a foreigner? The focus here, of course, is on sexual intimacy, addressing men in particular, but I think what it has here applies to women too, but it is addressing men in particular. And in your own words, what's the main point being made to husbands here in this text on this topic? What's the main point?
Don't let your eyes wander.
That's a very good application. Don't let your eyes wander or anything else, right? Exactly. The basic idea here, picking up on that, is that a man should find joy. The word joy is in the text. And sexual satisfaction with the wife of his youth, right? His own cistern, to use the metaphor in the text, right? In verse 15. He's not to go looking for it elsewhere, but look for it only with the one that he's entered into the covenant bond of marriage with. I'll say more about this later. But look now, flip over to chapter 2, verse 17. In verse 16, it talks about an adulteress who flatters with her words. And verse 17 says, this adulteress, this is a person that leaves the companion of her youth and forgets the covenant of her God. You see that? In the context here, the young man is instructed to avoid the adulterous woman. And in this verse, she is characterized, as I just said, as one who leaves the companion of her youth. Of her youth. So obviously, this text applies to both wives and husbands. A broken marriage vow, the point being made here is that a broken marriage vow involves leaving or abandoning the companion of one's youth. Right? The word companion here is what I want to focus on. The word companion is the Hebrew word for the closest of friends. There's different words in Hebrews for friends. I showed y'all that a couple weeks ago. Maybe a little longer than a couple weeks ago. But the word for companion here is the word for the closest of friends. It's translated intimate friend in chapter 16, verse 28 and elsewhere. So the point is that married couples are or should be intimate friends, companions, bound together by covenant and manifesting in loyalty and devotion, especially in the marital bed, right? Which is the point of chapter 5, one of the points of chapter 5. This leads me to my second point. Marital infidelity is a very bad thing. Way worse than our culture makes it out to be. It's a very bad thing. We've already seen one big reason for that. Namely, that broken vows means leaving, and that implies hurting one's closest companion. It is indeed an act of betrayal. But there's more. It's also an exchange. It's an exchange of true intimacy for a cheap imitation. Think about that. It's an exchange of true intimacy for a cheap imitation. Kidner in his commentary calls it a parody, right? Marital infidelity is a parody of true intimacy. Look back at chapter 5 again. Two of the verses that I already read underscore this idea. Verses 19 and 20, the last two verses that I read a while ago. As a loving hind and a graceful doe, let her breast satisfy you at all times. Be exhilarated always with her love. Then notice verse 20. For why should you, my son, be exhilarated with an adulteress and embrace the bosom, notice that next word, of a foreigner. Stranger. Yep. The word stranger and foreigner, that is telling here, right? In this context, the foreigner or the stranger is contrasted with the wife of your youth. Right? You see the point? And so it means stranger, right? One who is not a close companion or friend. If you're going after the adulterous woman or the adulterous man, or if you're on the flip side, right? Then you're going after a stranger. A foreigner, in a sense. Somebody that's not a close companion that you have entered into a covenant with, right? That's the point. Why should you embrace the bosom of a stranger, right? That's somebody who doesn't really care about you. That's ultimately doesn't know you. They're just using you for their own pleasure, right? It's also, not only is it a cheap imitation, it's also an affront to one's own honor. You lose your honor because you become a covenant breaker. Look at chapter 6. Janet, read chapter 6, verses 32 and 33.
But whoso committeth adultery with a woman lacketh understanding. He that doeth it destroyeth his own soul. A wound and dishonor shall he get, and his reproach shall not be wiped away.
You see that word dishonor? Right? My translation says disgrace and shame. Right? So it's an affront to your honor. You become a covenant breaker, and a covenant breaker is a person that has no honor because you're not keeping your promises. Right? It can also lead, this is interesting, to a loss of freedom. A loss of freedom of a certain kind. Flip all the way over to chapter 23. Chapter 23. We're on to read verses 27 and 28. Proverbs 23, 27, and 28.
For a prostitute is a deep pit, an adulterous woman is a narrow pit. Indeed, she lies in wait like a robber and increases the unfaithful among men.
You see those words? The adulterous woman, there's a harlot and the adulterous woman. They're both women of ill repute, you might say, but the adulteress is a deep pit and a narrow well. So, you don't want to fall into that, right? Because you're gonna be stuck and not get out, right? It's a trap. She lurks as a robber, right? So what's the point of all that? How does adultery lead to a loss of liberty and being in a trap? What do you think? What do you think that means? Oh boy, I thought y'all could
The
hit.
world that I've seen it work when that happens, you lose your family a lot of times.
Okay.
And then the person you've been with decides to go back to his wife. There she is, left.
Yeah. That's a really good point, Judy, and that's going to overlap with my next point, but I think that's relevant here as well, and it is. But think about it this way. One commentary I read on this said that a person who once gives in to some temptation to sin is now a slave to his lusts, right? Because it's going to get that much easier to do it later or again, right? But it could be a loss of freedom and liberty in other ways too. I hear about people who live in broken marriages who lose everything they had, right? Through divorce and all that, and they wind up in poverty. That's a loss of freedom of a certain kind. Which does lead me to the point that Judy was making, that there's also social costs and dangers, right? And some of that's actually mentioned in the book of Proverbs. Look over at chapter 29. Flip over to chapter 29. And Oliver, how about verse 3? Chapter 29, verse 3.
A man who loves wisdom makes his father glad, but he who befriends harlots destroys his wealth. By justice the king causes the land to stand, but a man of bribes tears it down.
Yeah, I only needed verse 3 there, but that's okay. But verse 3 says, you keep company with harlots, what happens? You lose your wealth. You waste your wealth, right? It's a social cost. Flip back to chapter 6. Proverbs chapter 6. And Judy Richmond, how about verse 26? Chapter 6, verse 26.
For on account of a prostitute, one is brought down to a loaf of bread, but the wife of another man preys on your precious life.
So again, there's loss of wealth and prosperity spent on sin, right? Spent on things that are not good. Losing your wealth for ridiculous pursuit of fleeting pleasures, right? And the adulteress, last part of that verse, hunts for the precious life. She's again wanting to trap the unwary, stupid man, right? And take what he's got. His reputation, his honor, and even his wealth. Skip down to verse 34. Judy Gregory, how about same chapter, chapter 6, verse 34.
It's interesting, I already have that underlined for some reason.
Okay.
Verse 34. For jealousy enrages a husband, and he will show no mercy.
So if you're committing adultery, there's going to be an offended spouse, right? And they might come looking for you with weapons, with guns, right? That's the whole point. A jealous man is going to not like you sleeping with his wife, right? And that could be dangerous for you. So that's another way in which you can lose your freedom, but you could by losing your very life, right? All right. It's also a waste of your best years. Kidner in the commentary points this out. It's a waste of your best years. Flip back to chapter 5. I guess I should have told you to keep your fingers there because I seem to keep coming back to that chapter. But chapter 5 and verse 9. Miss Betty, can you read that one?
Then
Yes, ma'am.
lest thou give thine honor unto others, and the years unto the cruel.
Okay. My translation says your vigor to others. Your vigor. But yours says honor. Is that right?
Honor.
Okay, that's interesting. What do you have in yours, Oliver?
Splendor.
Splendor. Okay, that's good. Or strength. Yeah. So obviously the Hebrew word here has multiple connotations, but splendor, honor could be part of that. Strength is no doubt part of that, right? But the idea here seems to be that you spend your energy, if you're engaged in adulterous relationships, you spend your energy and your resources and your sexual vigor on someone you're not married to and who won't help you build a legacy and a home, right? So you're wasting that opportunity. If you're sticking with your wife, you're building a legacy, you're building a home, you're building a family. That's not happening in adultery, right? So is it any wonder then that the author of Proverbs later on in chapter 6 asks a burning question, and pun intended. You'll see the pun in a minute. He asks a burning question about marital infidelity. Can a man take fire in his bosom and his clothes not be burned? Or can one walk on hot coals and his feet not be scorched? Right? Adultery is like that. Right? Third point. By God's design, a wife is a valuable life partner. The men in the room need to hear this, right? The women too, but the men especially, right? I wish the other guys were here, so take notes, Oliver. By God's design, a wife is a valuable life partner. There is a tendency among a lot of people in our culture today, including Christians, unfortunately, to think that the Bible itself teaches that women are just property. Right? Have you ever heard that idea? Some people accuse Christians of believing that, or accuse the Bible of teaching that, is my point, right? That women are just the property of men, that wives are just chattel slaves and childbearers, and that's all, right? But nothing could be further from the truth. From the very beginning, God made us, male and female, according to the book of Genesis, right? Equally created in God's image and equal in value and dignity. Am I right? Absolutely. And while men and women have different roles to fulfill in marriage, and men are given the authority to lead, I believe that, women are not slaves. And wives were given to men to be their helpers, suitable to them according to Genesis, right? Partners in life and ministry. Not only do we get this from Genesis, but from the focus of Proverbs, in Proverbs that we've already seen on the intimate covenantal bond that exists between husband and wife, and that clearly echoes this truth in Proverbs, right? And yet there are still more echoes of this truth. Let's briefly survey the vital role and influence, underline that word, that a wife has in the life of her husband. First of all, I want you to notice that a wife can be the making or undoing of her husband. The ladies may need to take notes about that. That a wife can be the making or the breaking of her husband. Look at chapter 18. Chapter 18, verse 22. It says, "He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord." Wow. That's a very important verse. We need to, it's a good verse. He who finds a wife finds a good thing. That just echoes what Genesis teaches, right? It was not good that man be alone. Isn't that what God said? And that's why he created Eve in the first place, right? He who finds a wife finds a good thing and obtains favor from the Lord. And the idea there is that having a wife can be a positive influence on a man's life. That's the whole point. Look over chapter 19, verse 14. House and wealth are an inheritance from fathers. You get your house, you get your money from your dad, right? Passed down through inheritance. But where do you get your wife from? A prudent wife, not just any wife, a prudent, that is, a wise wife, is from the Lord. Right? You want a prudent wife, don't you, if you're a man? You want a wise wife. And that's a gift if you have one. Right? Wisdom, that means your wife has wisdom that you need to think about and take advantage of, right?
That's the reason why our minds have to go all the time. I mean, that's the truth.
Maybe that explains it.
My mind has to go this way, this
Yep.
way, this way, this way.
Women can think about a lot of things.
The boy's calling, it's mom, it's not dad, mom, you this, and mom that.
That's a good point, Betty, but the main point I want you to focus on is that a good wife is a wise wife, and a wise wife is someone that a man ought to listen to, right? Chapter 12, skip back to chapter 12, verse 4. Janet, how about that? 12, verse 4.
A virtuous woman is a crown to her husband, but she that maketh ashamed is as rottenness in his bones.
So I said a wife can make or break her husband, right? You get both of those in this verse, right? A good wife, an excellent wife, is a crown to her husband. It's a reward, a gift, right? An honor. But a wife who shames her husband is rottenness to his bones. Skip down to skip over to chapter 31. I'm going to be focusing on this chapter and the virtuous wife next time, Lord willing. But I did want to catch a couple of verses here anyway. Rhonda, how about verses 10 and 11?
An accomplished woman who can find. Her value is far beyond rubies. Her husband's heart trusts in her, and he lacks nothing valuable.
So how beneficial can a wife be to her husband? An excellent wife will be to her husband. What? How?
Better than jewels.
Better than jewels. Better than money. Right? And he'll have no lack of gain. Right? That can include financial gain as well as gain in virtue and honor and respect in the community. Right? Oliver, skip down. You have that? Same chapter, but verse 23.
Her husband is known in the gates when he sits with the elders of the land.
So that's why I say about reputation, right? A man who has an excellent wife, other people know him, and they know him as a man of dignity and honor, a man who has a wife that provides that for him, right? But also, some other things that I want to, before I quit on this, look at chapter 21. 21, verse 19. Judy Richmond, how about that? 21:19.
It is better to live in the wilderness than with a quarrelsome and easily provoked woman. How many stones a dripping house? Is that
Oh, I'm going to come to that verse. In fact, I'm going to ask you to read it. But you hear what it says, right? A wife can make or break her husband, right? And if your wife is contentious, if she's quarrelsome, if she's argumentative, it's better to live in a desert, right?
It's better than what, did you say?
Better to live in a desert.
Oh, it's better.
That's what it says, right? All right, how about, Judy Gregory, how about chapter 19, verse 13? 19:13.
1913. A foolish son to his father's ruin and a wife's nagging is an endless dripping. Now that's not the way it reads in another Bible.
There's one translation, I was going to admit, there's one translation, I don't remember what it is. Maybe it's the NIV, but don't.
Mine says it's, a foolish son is the calamity of his father, and the continuous of a wife are a continual dropping.
That's right. So one translation says a nagging wife is like a faucet that goes drip, drip, drip. All right, so there you go. Can't take it no more, right? Just go live in the corner. All right, anyway, I'm picking on the women enough now. Another point, though, under this same heading. The womanly wisdom of a good wife is largely the cause of a stable family. The womanly wisdom, or maybe I should say the godly wisdom of a good wife, is largely the cause of a stable family. The husband has a role to play, but not nearly as much as the woman does. Look at one more verse here, chapter 14, verse 1. Chapter 14, verse 1. A wise woman builds her house. That's not talking about constructing a physical building. The house is the family here. That's the context. A wise woman builds her family, but the foolish tears it down with her own hands. My focus tonight is on the wise woman there, right? Well, there are lots of lessons that we could draw from these verses that we just looked at, but the one that I'm making here is that all of this, all of the power and influence that a woman has on her husband and on her family is proof positive that in God's economy, a wife is not a slave, but a vital, indispensable life partner. Right? Another lesson, and now I wish the college guys were here tonight. Another lesson for both men and women is, if all this is true, especially the last verses we looked at, choose wisely when you marry. Choose wisely. Any thoughts or questions? That's all I got tonight.
Yeah, I was thinking earlier when you were talking about, I can't remember the exact wording, false intimacy.
The cheap imitation.
Cheap imitation.
Yeah.
Okay. Porn would also fit in that
Absolutely, yeah.
category.
It would, absolutely. Yeah. Very, very good point. All right. Any other thoughts or questions? I could have spent a lot more time on this, I know. Especially that chapter 5, which is, I don't know, maybe you don't need mixed company for that one, but but
It
anyway.
makes sense that Solomon would write some of the things he put in here. You got 1,000 nagging wives. I don't know how you dealt with that.
Well, he probably, yeah, maybe so, but he also probably learned a lot of lessons about his own sin that's in these verses as well. Yeah, that's good, but that's a good point.